Carmelo Anthony just got indicted for stabbing Austin Metcalf, and this is the first tweet that I see. They are trying to make an example of Carmelo Anthony to serve as a reminder to all of Black America. And you know what? I agree. The reminder is that if you stab somebody in the heart because they told you to move, you're going to prison for life.
Carmelo Anthony stepped into the courtroom the moment the heavy wooden doors swung open. His shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the floor, like he was carrying a weight too heavy for anyone his age to bear. Just weeks ago, people knew him as a confident young athlete with a future full of promise. Now, under the constant glare of the media, endless legal battles, and a scandal involving his own parents, he seemed like a shadow of that person. Both his mother and father were now facing murder charges tied to the death of Austin Metcalf. It wasn't just a court case anymore, it was a tragedy that had spilled into every corner of his life. Every step he took, every movement he made was tracked by cameras, all waiting to catch a crack in his composure. And the cracks were there. Those who had been watching the case closely noticed the change.
I asked the grand jury to return a first-degree murder indictment against Carmelo Anthony, which they did.
A Texas district attorney taking to social media to announce Carmelo Anthony is formally facing charges that could lock him up for life.
Carmelo barely spoke anymore, even to his lawyers. He avoided reporters, ignored shouted questions, and sat quietly at the defense table, often staring off as if lost in another world. People who worked in the courthouse began using one word again and again to describe him: unstable. Not in the way of explosive anger or public scenes, but in a quieter, more unsettling way. Prosecutors kept reminding the court that this case was about more than just one young man's mental state. They argued that investigators had uncovered a carefully planned series of events, a money trail, suspicious communications, and a calculated scheme that led to a violent death at a high school track meet. Every new piece of evidence seemed to hit Carmelo harder, and with each blow, his face grew more distant, his body language heavier. Just a few feet away sat the Metcalf family. They didn't speak or react, they simply stared at him, their faces locked in silent judgment. They believed he had taken their son's life, and now they suspected his parents had helped him. The whispers in the gallery were getting louder. People wondered how he would handle himself when the verdict finally came. If he already looked like this before the trial had even begun, what would he look like when the final decision was read? The prosecution's latest evidence had nothing to do with burner phones or bank transfers. This time, they were focusing on Carmelo's emotional state in the days after his parents were charged. They showed the jury photos and short video clips taken from news broadcasts, courthouse security cameras, and public appearances. In each one, Carmelo looked smaller, thinner, and more withdrawn. One clip in particular caught the gallery's attention. It was filmed 2 weeks earlier, right after prosecutors announced new conspiracy charges against his parents. In the video, Carmelo is leaving the courthouse with his lawyers. A reporter yells a question about the Metcalf family. Carmelo stops mid-step, stares at nothing for several seconds, and then walks away, not toward the waiting car, but in another direction entirely. His lawyers rush after him, whispering urgently, but he keeps his head down and ignores everyone. Sources inside the court revealed that his lawyers had quietly asked for extra breaks during hearings, citing his fragile emotional state. He had been skipping meals, losing sleep, and spending long hours alone in holding cells before and after court sessions. Some officers even placed him under special watch, a step usually taken when someone's mental stability is in question. The Metcalf family's lawyer took the opportunity to suggest that his silence wasn't grief, it was guilt. The defense countered by saying this was the natural reaction of a young man in shock, dealing with an overwhelming crisis. But to the public, the difference didn't seem to matter anymore. Social media was filled with side-by-side comparisons of Carmelo before and after his parents' arrest, with captions like, "You can see it in his eyes, and this isn't the same kid." His mental health and his role in what happened that night had now become the central questions hanging over the trial. The most intense moment of the day came when the judge allowed parts of Carmelo's private counseling report to be read aloud. Written by a prison psychologist, the report described acute psychological distress, a level of emotional strain common in people living under relentless public and legal pressure. It detailed how Carmelo often paced his cell late at night, sometimes speaking quietly to himself. In one incident, he sat for nearly 20 minutes, staring at a wall and repeating, "I didn't know," over and over. After one particularly rough day in court, he refused to speak or make eye contact with anyone for almost 24 hours. The jury was shown a still image from a courthouse hallway camera. Carmelo hunched forward, elbows on his knees, his face buried in his hands. A deputy sat nearby, while the slow, repetitive tap of Carmelo's foot echoed on the tile floor. Prosecutors argued this was the breakdown of a man whose lies were catching up to him. The defense painted him as a young man crushed by trauma, the collapse of his family's reputation, and the sudden possibility of losing both parents to life sentences. The judge urged the jury to focus on facts, not feelings. But for those watching, the two were impossible to separate. Seeing someone accused is one thing. Watching them slowly unravel is something else entirely. Then came another blow: a series of transcripts from Carmelo's monitored jail calls. These conversations took place just days after his parents were charged. One recording from less than 48 hours ago made the entire courtroom tense. On the tape, Carmelo says, "I don't know how much longer I can do this," before falling silent for several long seconds. In another call, he mutters, "It's falling apart," followed by the sound of something slamming, possibly his hand, against the metal table in the visitation room. Heavy breathing fills the rest of the recording. These weren't casual phone chats. They were glimpses into the mind of someone on the edge. After those calls, officials placed him under closer observation. Federal agents claimed this was a preventative measure, though the prison avoided giving details. They mentioned skipped meals, isolation, and his growing refusal to take part in daily routines. The defense fought to keep the recordings private, saying they would only stir sympathy. The prosecution insisted they were relevant, especially if Carmelo's stress could lead to mistakes in testimony or even new revelations about the alleged family plot. Online, people were already divided. Some saw the videos as proof of guilt, signs of paranoia setting in. Others believed they showed the harsh reality of a young man being judged by the world before the trial had even begun. Either way, one thing was clear: the confident athlete who once smiled for cameras was gone. In his place was someone raw, restless, and teetering on the edge. And now, the trial wasn't just about whether he was involved in the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. It was also about whether this young man's mind and life could survive the storm that was still building around him. The question hanging over the entire courtroom isn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It's whether Carmelo Anthony can hold himself together long enough to make it through this trial without completely breaking. When the prosecution calls their next witness, a prison psychologist, you can feel the shift in the room. The air grows heavier. She walks in calm and composed, her presence almost intimidating. She speaks with the kind of confidence that comes from years of working with inmates whose minds and spirits have been pushed to the limit. She's seen the strong collapse, the proud become desperate, and the quiet turn dangerous. Her testimony begins clinically, but the details are chilling. She describes noticeable changes in Carmelo's behavior over the last few weeks. During legal briefings with his attorneys, he becomes restless, pacing the floor in small, repeated loops until guards are forced to step in. His sleep patterns are in shambles, with nights where he manages only 2 or 3 hours before crashing in the middle of the day, refusing to get out of his bunk. But it's what she says next that makes the gallery fall completely silent. She tells the court about the journal entries confiscated from Carmelo's cell. In them, there are fragments of thoughts, half-finished sentences written with such force that the paper is almost torn. Phrases like, "No way out and it doesn't matter anymore, they destroyed me" appear again and again. Some pages are so deeply indented from the pressure of the pen, they look like they've been carved rather than written. The prosecution wastes no time tying this to their larger argument. They say this isn't just about emotional strain, it's about a dangerous mental state that could affect his cooperation in court, his willingness to tell the truth, or even his ability to survive the trial. One attorney warns, a man under this kind of pressure can become unpredictable. And when uncertainty sets in, the truth can disappear. Next, a corrections officer from Carmelo's unit takes the stand. His voice is steady, but his words hit hard. He recounts multiple incidents over the past 3 weeks that, in his opinion, show a man unraveling in real time. There was the morning Carmelo refused to leave his cell for head count, muttering, "I've got nothing left." Another time, they found him hours later sitting on the cold concrete floor, staring at the wall motionless, unblinking. Then the officer describes what happened just 4 nights ago. During a routine inspection, guards found strips of fabric torn from Carmelo's bedsheet hidden under his mattress. No immediate action was taken, but prison policy demanded he be placed under closer watch. He didn't resist, the officer says quietly. He didn't speak. It was like we weren't even there. The prosecution uses this as further proof that the mental toll is destroying him faster than the actual trial. The defense fires back, accusing them of using mental health as a weapon to influence the jury. But the judge allows the testimony, calling it directly relevant to Carmelo's current state. The tension in the gallery is thick enough to feel. Reporters scribble notes furiously, knowing these quotes will dominate tomorrow's headlines. The Metcalf family sits motionless, their expressions impossible to read. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy is already building. Commentators speculate, could his condition lead to a mistrial? A plea bargain? Or could he simply collapse before sentencing? While news vans line the street and cameras flash, one reality hangs over everything like a storm cloud. Carmelo Anthony is not the same man he was when this began. The image of the calm, confident young athlete has faded. Something deep inside him is shifting, and whatever comes next could change everything. Then the final piece of the day's testimony is played for the court, a recorded phone call from the jail made just 2 nights ago. The audio is scratchy, but Carmelo's voice is unmistakable. "Everything's gone," he says. "My parents, the house, the cars, I don't even know if I'm gonna make it through this." There's a long pause, and when he speaks again, his voice is lower, almost broken. "This isn't me. I'm done." The defense team shifts uneasily, fully aware of how these words will land with the jury. The prosecution doesn't move. They just let the silence stretch, letting every person in that room absorb what they've just heard. Across the aisle, the Metcalf family exchange glances. There are no smiles, no expressions of triumph, only the quiet recognition that the trial has crossed into territory no one expected. When the judge finally calls for a recess, no one moves right away. The jurors sit frozen, staring straight ahead. In the back row, reporters are already typing. On their screens, headlines take shape, "Carmelo at breaking point." As the guards lead him out, Carmelo's eyes stay locked on the ground. The confident athlete who walked into this courthouse months ago is gone. What's left is a thinner, slower, almost unrecognizable figure. The heavy doors close behind him, their echo ringing in the room long after he's disappeared. And in that moment, it becomes clear this trial is no longer just about the crime. It's about whether Carmelo Anthony can survive the weight of it.